Hello, this is Mayor Raz J. Baraka, and thank you for tuning in to EduTalk, where we will discuss incredible topics centered around our young people, about local control, community schools, our special needs population, creating curriculum and opportunities for young people to move forward from elementary school into careers or to universities. It is the opportunity for us to discuss our young people's creativity, their imagination, their ability to move our city forward. We need them in Newark. And we need the best educated, the most well-trained, incredibly courageous and imaginative young people coming out of our school system. And this show gives us an opportunity to engage those topics. Again, thank you for watching. God bless.
Welcome to EduTalk. My name is Antoinette Richardson, and I'm the Chief Education Officer for Mayor Baraka's Office of Comprehensive Community Education. You may have heard that the Newark Public Schools, Newark Board of Education, has a $1 billion budget. $1 billion. Today on EduTalk, we're going to break down the big billion for you so that hopefully you will understand how it's distributed. Here to help us understand the budget is the financial brains of the Newark Board of Education, Ms. Valerie Wilson. And Val has won numerous awards and recognition over the years for her outstanding performance in the management of the Newark Public Schools budget. Welcome, Val.
Thanks, Tony. It's great to be here.
I am so glad you could make it. And seriously, I really am. You know, we do a fun fact on each show. So what I do, I throw out the fun fact to those who are watching, and they have some time, you know, while the show is going on to try to figure out the answer or look up the answer. But this time it's really complicated. So the question is, do the registered voters in Newark vote on their school budget? Okay. Complicated, right? So we get back with the answer to that before the show is over. So if you think you know where to find the answer to that, you got a few minutes to go ahead and do that. So Val, you've been with the Newark Public Schools for over 20 years, is that correct?
That is correct.
That's when I think
22.
22 years, okay, pretty good. And so the district is mandated by law to prepare a balanced budget every year, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Has there been any major shift in the way the district spends money over the years, or has it kind of remained unchanged over the years?
We've worked a lot on the budget, and we've done some things in terms of how we allocate funding to schools. So we do something called a weighted student formula that helps us to equitably distribute funds. And then principals and schools, along with their communities, have the autonomy to actually look at those dollars, make a determination as to where and how they're going to be spent in conformance with the state's accounting codes.
You said a lot. And you know, this budget stuff, it can be overwhelming. And I know you know how to understand it. You understand it and you know how to articulate it in a way that hopefully I'll get a better understanding, even though I've heard it a lot of times. I always learn something new. And that the parents and the community and the other people who are watching will have a better idea on what this complicated budget is all about. So what is the school funding formula?
Well, in New Jersey, the school funding formula is how schools are funded. It's a formula that was created in 2007 by the state legislators to determine how funds, state funds, would be allocated to schools. And that formula basically determines based on the types of children that you have in your district. And when I say types, we have children who qualify for free and reduced meals. We have children who are special needs. We have children who are English is a second language to them. And we have children, in those various categories. Those categories are used to determine how much aid is given per student to the district.
So if a student falls into one of those categories, is a different amount of money allotted for them than for students who aren't?
It could be. There's an additional factor. So every child or every person has a value of 1. But if I have special needs, I may have a value of 1.5 or 1.25. And go ahead. I'm sorry.
I don't want to ask you a lot of questions, but
please,
just to help me understand, so that extra 0.2 or 0.5 could or should be used to support the needs of those particular students?
Right, because the funding formula is broken down into categories. We have general fund aid, we have special needs aid, we have transportation, we have what's called adequacy aid, we have, 5 or 6 categories. Newark also has something that was newly developed about 2 years ago called host district city aid. So all of those come together to make that final number, and they are all considered forms of state aid.
What is host district aid?
Host district aid was given to the district to help us sort of offset some of the additional expenses that the district has been incurring over the years. As everyone is well aware, we do have a large charter population here, and that was a new form of aid that was created 2 years ago that was given to us. At that point, we received about $22 million in aid.
So that basically helps offset the impact to the Newark Public Schools District from the money, and I'm sure you'll get to this, the money that basically flows through the district but goes to the charter schools.
Exactly.
Okay.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Okay.
Makes sense.
All right.
I don't say I like it. I say it makes sense.
Good.
Okay.
I want to make it as simple as possible because the budget is a critical and important piece for the citizens of Newark to understand. When they understand the budget, they understand how the schools are funded, they understand why the funding comes in the way it does, and how we use it.
I mean, it's very important. I mean, in order to, everyone has a household budget, and you have to know how much money you have and what you have to do with it. Then hopefully you have a little something left to do the things that you want to do, and sounds like it's kind of the same thing.
It's the same principle, just added zeros.
Ooh, I'll take the added zeros. Okay, so how are Newark schools funded? Where does the money come from?
Okay, the money comes from basically 2 or 3 places. The majority of our money comes from state aid, which are the categories that we just talked about. And that totals up to approximately for this school year, 17-18, that was $743 million. So here we're getting to that big billion number you talked about. The second category where a district receives revenue is in tax levies. And Newark contributes to the district about last year. For this year, I would say I keep saying last year because we're already in the 18-19 budget planning. So it's like I'm working in the new year now. Okay. So 17-18 is what we're talking about. And in 17-18, the tax levy was approximately $123 million.
So that's the money that comes
from the city and from the citizens of the city in the form of taxes.
So property owners basically pay that, and that money goes into the school.
Right, and then there are some small other forms of aid associated with categorical aid, which is specifically earmarked for Title I students, for IDA students, and any other special aid we may receive.
What is IDA?
IDA is for Individuals with Disability Educational Act. IDEA.
Thank you. Thank you. So how does the spending break down on the district level?
The spending breaks down in terms of, and I'm going to refer to some slides that I have
Absolutely.
just to refresh my memory. I know quite a bit of it, but we spend approximately $339 million this year went into schools. And we were able, in the course of our budget prep for this year, to give schools $5 million additional. When we talk in the future about the 18-19 budget, you will see that we've also been able to give them some additional money for next year.
So how were you able to do that?
Well, for the 18-19 school year, Governor Murphy just announced his budget, I think the end of March. We are feverishly planning and developing the district's budget. Schools have done their budget work, central office has, and we received an additional $37 million in aid, which was very significant for Newark, because Newark's been flat funded and underfunded for several years, right? So underfunding in Newark from the state level is approximately $140 million a year. So that 37 is now beginning to address the formula, because when the legislators developed a formula in 2007, they did not fully fund it. So Newark had, among with other districts, have been at a disadvantage of sorts in terms of their aid. So that creates a gap within the budget and forces us to have to develop strategies and opportunities to make sure that we cover all of our expenses. So the aid is coming in as new aid, promised to us by the governor, promised over a period of 4 years to sort of true up the formula. When that happens, then we're beginning to see the true form of aid that the district should receive.
Okay, so, and I may be 100% wrong in my understanding, but I'm just going to throw it out here. Underfunding, I'm clear on what that means.
Yes.
Does flat funding mean that the funding does not change, that it's the same as it was?
If you look back, and the district's budget presentations are available on our website, they can go right there, look for budget information, and they can see multiple years of information. You will see that Newark's aid at that $743 million we talked about has remained fairly consistent for the last 6 or 7 years.
Wow.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, there are talks in many education circles about how much state aid a district like Newark and some other districts get, how much that is in comparison to the tax levy. And so my question is, what does that really mean, that so much of our aid for our schools comes from the state? We just came out of state control into local control, but the majority of the money for our school district comes from the state. Doesn't mean that Newarkers don't contribute to that. They do. But does that give the state more jurisdiction over Newark in any way than it does over other districts who may contribute more locally, who may be able to do that and not get as much money from the state? Does the state still have something on us?
No, it doesn't give them jurisdiction, but there is going to be a need for Newark citizens and the state to contribute what they should. Because yes, 82% of our aid currently comes from the state. 14% of it comes from the tax levy. On the city side, we're about 40 million or so below what the city should be contributing. So remember I said it's 123 million. You cannot just turn around now, we're in local control, and say we're going to up taxes by $40 million. We have to do that incrementally. And you've heard the mayor and several others talk about Newark paying its fair share. The state must pay its fair share, and Newark must pay its fair share. So we've been levying taxes to the tune of 2% a year for several years, because that's the cap that the state has placed on property tax relief to ensure that the property holders were not significantly disadvantaged. And that works out to somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.7 to $2 million a year in terms of an increased tax on Newark residents. But what it also does is bring Newark closer to its local fair share, and that is done if you look at a house that's assessed, let's say, at $175,000, it's probably somewhere about $2 a year in an increase.
I don't know.
Yeah,
it was a little more than $2.
It translates out when you divide the assessed value, and that's a little bit more complicated for this show.
No,
but
it
that
is.
taxpayers understand, well, if you get aid, why is there a tax levy? It's because there's a formula that we both have to meet. The state has to meet, and the city of Newark, being the district. And that's the way the two come together.
Thank you. And I think, that as I have told some folks on previous shows, that's another whole show that we're talking about, because I think it also has to do with broadening the tax base and increasing, some of the folks who do pay taxes, who may not pay taxes now for various reasons. So that's another whole show. But thank you. Is there anything that we haven't talked about yet that is important that you would like to talk about?
So I think it's important that our community understands that the majority, 52% of our budget goes towards our schools, right? Because there's always this conversation and this tension that says, oh, we're concerned, enough is not going to the classroom, it's not getting to the kids. 52% goes into schools. But as a district with a large number of employees, because we've got about 5,000 employees by the time you put everybody together, we have a significant payroll. So there's a lot that goes into payroll. There's a lot that goes into benefits. But every year we are trying consistently, regardless, and have been successful at it, regardless of what aid the district receives, we've ensured that the per pupil funding has remained consistent. And that's been a challenge.
So just so that folks can kind of visualize it, because I know you have the visuals, what percentage of the budget goes actually into classrooms and servicing students, and what percentage goes to central office, that big boogeyman where everyone thinks that all the money goes?
So, you have, that's a great question, and you have this conversation that goes on that says, how much do we pay for teachers? What do we pay for classroom instruction? But a school is much more than that.
Yes, it is.
A school, you can't have a school if you're not serving meals. You can't have a school if you don't have security guards. You can't have a school if you don't have custodians, people to clean, nurses. So all of those things are wrapped in. So we talk about direct pieces to school budgets, and then we also talk about what happens for school support. So out of our entire budget, there is approximately 5% that goes to the central office, clearly, specifically for overhead. Somebody like myself, you would say that the majority of my work is overhead. I do have some effect and impact on schools, so you should charge some of my time to schools, but the majority would be charged to overhead. That's 5% of our budget, $53 million. That's what our central office costs us to operate. The other 500 and some almost is associated with schools. So 300 specifically to schools, another 200 million for those other kinds of services that I've talked about. And then we have a chunk that goes for charter aid, as you talk about that pass-through. That's about $242 million.
That was my next question. And I think it's important for folks to hear that, and to hear that number and to digest it, no matter how they feel about it, or, I don't even want to say which side, because, I've said it a million times. I don't think there are too many folks who are just strictly charter school parents or strictly traditional. You know, so many families have children who go to either or both at different times. But I still think it's really important that we understand where the money goes and what the impact is, you know, all the way around on both sides. So thank you. Can you say that number one more time?
242 million.
242 million.
For approximately 16,000 students.
Thank you. For approximately 16,000 students.
That are in charters. In the district, we have about 34,000 students. So when you talk about us as a district, you talk about us as a district, some people will see the number 55,000. That's combined.
Right.
Those children reside in the District of Newark, and that's why they're counted as part of Newark's district enrollment.
So the 242 million that basically it channels through the Newark Public Schools District to the charter schools. Does the Newark Public Schools District or Board of Education have any say-so over how that money is spent?
We don't, because it is a pass-through. The charter law, as I'm sure you're familiar with, says that 90% of the funding should follow the child. So just as we have a formula in traditional public schools, the charters also have a formula of that 90%, which is determined at the state level in New Jersey. And districts are directed and advised to provide that funding and payment twice a month for the course of the school year.
Thank you very much, and thank you for just opening up on that topic. You know, it's always the elephant in the room when we talk about schools and budgets. So I think I had one more question. Where are we now? Where is the district now in the budget process?
Well, we received our aid notices on the end of March. We have actually developed our formula with a lot of work on my budget team and a number of other groups. It's a team effort. It's not just budget, it's academics, it's schools, it's operations, it's everybody coming together, facilities, talking about what the needs are, what we need to do. So we've developed our formula, we've run the formula, and we've allocated monies to schools. We were able this year, and I'm sort of giving a preview to the budget hearing we're going to have later down in the year, that we were able to allocate an additional $19 million to schools. We received 37. We've covered charter school increases, which are occurring. We've covered all of the things we need to. Schools have had the opportunity to develop their budgets. They've completed them and turned them back in. We will be loading our final budget by April 20th. We will advertise that budget at some point, and then we will have a public hearing, which I encourage everybody to come to, because that's where we talk about it. Schools are also required to have community meetings with their constituents and their parents and their students and their staff to tell those groups, you know, here is what School X's budget looks like. Here are the programs we're going to be doing this year. Here are things that we are investing in. You know, at a district level, we're investing in bilingual education. We're investing in improving special ed inclusion and making sure children with those needs have their needs met. And we're ensuring that we continue supporting our strategic plan and looking forward to the future.
Absolutely. So do you know now when and where that budget hearing will be held?
Tentatively, it's going to be scheduled for May 7th. And it will be probably scheduled at Central High School.
Okay, May 7th probably,
Yes.
Central High School probably.
And it will be publicly advertised.
And folks can also go on the Newark Public Schools website and get that information,
Once
correct?
we post it, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we're going to go back to fun fact. Okay, do the registered voters in Newark vote on their school budget? The answer is a very complicated answer, and I'm going to give the answer that I think is the answer. And if you think if you want to modify my answer, you are welcome to do that. So this is what I think the answer is. I think that the answer is that it's complicated. The last time that voters in Newark voted on the school budget was in 1995, prior to the takeover of the district by the state. Now that we've regained local control of our schools, voters will have the opportunity to vote on the school budget in 2019. Here's where it gets complicated. Unless Newark moves the school board election from April to November. Districts that have their school board elections in November, and this is where I need you to tell me if I'm right or wrong, they don't vote on their school budget unless it exceeds a 2% increase.
That is correct.
Woo!
Wow, you're a star
Okay.
pupil,
All right,
Tony.
all right,
You're on your
okay.
way to an A+.
So we haven't voted on the school budget in over 20 years. Next year we will, unless the election is moved to November, which is what most districts have done.
Yeah.
So
in the county, there are 2 districts that have an April election, Irvington and us.
Irvington and Newark are left, and there's debate, a lot of debate about that both ways, and that's another whole show. Oh boy! So thank you for that, and I want to. I wonder, did anybody out there know that? I know there's some old heads out here who remember and who knew that, but right now, to everyone out there watching, I really hope that this edition of EduTalk has helped you to understand the district budget of the Newark Board of Education. And it's funny now, sometimes I say Newark Public Schools, sometimes I say Newark Board of Education, because we've transitioned back to local control. So I kind of use them interchangeably now. But it's a lot of information, and our next show will focus on understanding individual school budgets, how they're developed, how they impact the education of our children, and we'll have two principals on who will explain their school budgets. So I want to say thank you, Val. I know there's so much more. Like, you could actually take 2 hours because you enjoy talking about this stuff. It's so much in detail, and you know, we will make sure that people can actually see some of what you're talking about. But I hope you'll be back another time so we can go maybe into a particular aspect in more detail.
I'd love to come back. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.